Donc, sans plus tarder, je vais faire une petite introduction. Mon nom, c'est Williamson Ducé. Je suis directeur de technologie chez Origine Village. Je suis accompagné avec Esther Youth, qui est la directrice générale. La session d'aujourd'hui sera divisée en deux temps. Donc, la première portion, c'est Julie va nous faire une présentation sur les principes, comment comprendre les principes du ESG, à quel point ça peut affecter votre entreprise et comment tirer profit aussi, parce qu'il y a quand il y a des défis, il y a des opportunités aussi. Donc, elle va nous parler pendant à peu près 1 heure et par la suite, on aura une session de questions qui dure à peu près 30 minutes. Donc, vous allez pouvoir poser vos questions, les mettre dans le chat. On monitor le chat. En plus, avec qu'est-ce qui arrive avec la nouvelle technologie, l'intelligence artificielle, on a la possibilité d'enregistrer la session, tous les points culminants, les points intéressants. Donc, on a des note-takers qui sont des bots dans Zoom qui prennent des notes pour nous. Donc, on va vous partager l'information au niveau des notes de tout ce qui s'est fait aujourd'hui aussi, ou les points saillants, ainsi de suite. Et je crois que Julie sera dans l'amabilité de nous partager son fichier PDF ou sa présentation d'aujourd'hui. Comme ça, vous pouvez vous référer encore à ces astuces, ces clés, ces choses précieuses qu'elle va vous partager aujourd'hui. Donc, ça semble tout ce que j'ai à dire aujourd'hui. Pour les gens qui viennent d'arriver ou qui n'étaient pas là avant, la formation est en anglais. Donc, si vous avez des questions en français, posez-les. On va faire la traduction. Puis, je pense que Julie comprend très bien le français, mais la session est en anglais aujourd'hui. Donc, sans plus tarder, j'aimerais vous présenter Julie, qui sera notre expert pour la session du learnUP du 29 novembre 2023. Julie, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much. Et comme on l'a mentionné, je suis tout à fait bilingue. Je travaille un peu plus en anglais. Donc, c'est pour ça que la présentation est en anglais. Mais je me suis assurée d'avoir mis beaucoup de visuels, justement pour permettre à tout le monde de comprendre. Donc, si jamais vous avez des questions pendant la période de questions qui sont en français, n'hésitez pas. So as I mentioned, I am bilingual, but I work mostly in English, hence why the presentation is in English. But anybody can ask the question in the language of their choice, whether it's French or English. For other languages, I cannot guarantee that I will understand everything. Okay, so maybe before I share my screen, I just want to share a little bit about me. So my name is Julie Savaria. I am the founder and CEO of Masla Empathy Lab, which is a Jedi boutique firm. And you may think, ooh, Jedi, Star Wars. But it's actually not for that, but you can think of it this way as well. So Jedi stands for Justice, Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion. And I help organizations in French or English from all industries across the world now, pretty much, to further develop their inclusive practices, to further develop the equitable practices through training, coaching, and strategic consulting. And my organization is also a B Corp. And you will get to learn a little bit what it means, especially in the context of ESGs. Give me one moment so that I can share my beautiful screen with you. All right. Can you see my screen?
We see your screen, but we see multiple things. We see your
The present to view.
slide. Yeah.
Oh, okay, shoot. Okay, wait, just give me 1 second. Stop sharing. Just give me one moment. It won't be long. All right, it's okay. Share and Technology and me, we are not the bestest of friends all the time.
There you go.
There we go. Okay, so when it comes to ESG, ESG is a topic that's been thrown around for quite some time, or maybe it's the first time that you've actually heard about it. So therefore, it is my pleasure to introduce you to what ESGs are, and specifically in the context of an entrepreneur or a company or a business. One thing about ESGs that people don't necessarily get is how intertwined ESGs are with the growth of an organization, of a business, especially nowadays where we are really pushing forward on, yes, being profitable, but there is an impact that is associated with what the company does with its business model. So that's what we're going to talk about today. But first, I always do a land acknowledgement. So maybe you have heard what a land acknowledgement is, seen what a land acknowledgement is, but to give you a bit more context, so we live on territories that are not ours originally, and therefore doing that acknowledgement, recognizing that we stand on these lands, is also a way to honor the first inhabitants of these lands. And I always spend a lot of time thinking and rethinking and redefining what is my land acknowledgement for the lands, depending on the city where you are. And there are so many ways for you to know on whose lands you're standing on, whether it's a treaty land, unceded land, etc. So the land acknowledgement that I have is really coming from that place. So acknowledging that I am mixed Senegalese and white Quebecer settler on this territory, on the land that has long served as a site of meeting and exchange amongst Indigenous peoples, including the Haudenosaunee and Anishinaabe nations, and actually the Kanyankehaka, or the Mohawk nation, has been deemed the custodians of those lands and waters. Therefore, it's important for me to acknowledge and really thank the diverse Indigenous peoples whose presence mark this territory on which peoples of the world now gather, especially knowing the names of the land. So for example, Montreal is Tiohtià:ke. So I teach that to my kids. My kids know that. Canada used to be Turtle Island, etc. So maybe with this land acknowledgement, it would not be for you to just take what I say or just copy paste something, but to really come up with your own, right? To really reflect on what is my relationship with the land, what has it given me, and what have I given it back to it, right? So rooted once again in the principles of ESGs, this is tremendously important. So what we will get from our time together today, so just to keep in mind, we only have 1 hour, right? And these topics can go on for a very long time. So this is really meant to give you a glimpse of what ESGs are, to be able to maybe better understand what is the difference between ESG and other impact principles that you may hear about, but also to understand how these factors affect your business and what you can do concretely as a first step, starting point to really embed ESGs within your organization. So why are we having this conversation? So I hinted at it a little bit, but we have to be honest. Whenever there's something that has a positive impact on the world, in the environment, it always gets scoped up, appropriated, misused, and then at the end misunderstood. And it's the same thing for anything touching on sustainability. So about 20 years ago, the concept of CSR, or RSE in French, so corporate social responsibility, has garnered a lot of traction, right? People were really talking about it, thinking this was the way to really push organizations to have more responsible and ethical practices, right? And fast forward to maybe about five years ago, the concept of ESGs, so environment, social, and governance, really came through. And the reason why they decided to really target it more is because they realized that the term sustainability was becoming almost like a basket, where everyone was just throwing their own understanding. There was a lot of cases of greenwashing. You just have to look at all the oil spills in the oceans, the scandal of Volkswagen faking its emissions to pass the test in Europe, and really up to Nike, right? Using child labor, right, in Asia. And people, well, legislators didn't really know what to do with all of that, because yes, it falls under sustainability, but they needed something better. So ESG really came from an effort from investors to try to give a framework for businesses to be able to guide their efforts in a more strategic way, and in a way that it can really get embedded into their business model. So ESGs are really a generic term, so for environment, social, and governance, that really aims to speak about the ability of an organization to assess its risks, but also its opportunities, as Billy mentioned earlier. And this is really important because we are in a very rapidly changing world, and therefore the complexities that we are facing in terms of the climate change, environment, social issues, governance issues are just becoming multiple. So therefore, being able to understand what we're talking about before implementing something is even more important, as for everything else. So to be more precise, so when we talk about the E in ESG, so here we're talking about everything that addresses a company's operations, environmental impact, and environmental stewardship. So here we're talking about, climate change, rising temperature, land ownership, water ownership, natural resources, accessibility, scarcity, etc. For the S for social, refers to how a company manages relationships with and creates value with its stakeholders. And when I talk about stakeholders, I really mean everyone who is in touch with the organization that can have an influence on the organization, right? So we're talking employees, we're talking customers, clients, users, however you want to call them, shareholders, if it's part of the model of your organization, the board, the community in which the organization is serving, right? So everything pertaining to the community. And here we talk for the social. Here we can talk about inclusive practices. We talk about employee retention, like how the company is recruiting. We talk also about community involvement as well. So everything touching the humans interacting with the organization. And then the G for governance refers to the company's leadership and management strategy, practices, policies, control, mostly internal, and shareholders' rights, if it's applicable. So here we're really targeting the decision-making dynamics, right? So we're going to talk about the board diversity, for example, the internal policies and processes to aim for a more human-centered and thorough decision-making, etc. So the principle of environment, social, and governance, ESG, is used really nowadays more as a framework to assess the different risks and opportunities, right? As I mentioned earlier. So for the environment, social, and governance, but here we also talk about economic, there are there are different parts that are moving together, and people tend to think about things like these in silos, right? So I'm going to tackle this environmental part, I'm going to tackle this social part, I'm going to tackle this internal part, this socioeconomic part, etc. But what we have to remember is that all of these are systems. Nothing operates in silos. So the E, the S, the G, and everything that revolves around them will impact the entire landscape a company operates in. So you may think, okay, well, I work from home. My environmental footprint is not that bad. Well, guess what? Actually, yes, it can be. Like, what do you recycle? Do you have a car that uses solely gas, or is it hybrid or electric? Do you have compost at home, etc.? So that's a way, an example of how our environment, the environmental component of the ESG, can inform on our carbon footprint, right? Can inform on the way that we impact the environment around us when we travel. Do we take the plane? Do we take the train? And all of these different aspects. In terms of the social systems, well, once again, it's about the same thing, right? It's regarding, okay, well, am I making sure that internally I'm putting in place systems or processes or procedures that will make sure that my people will show up to the best of their abilities, to the full of their potential. They're not going to do our famous code switching, right? Will they be able to be who they are? Do they feel that they're treated well? Do they feel proud to be working within the business, right? For the economic system and also governance system, so the decision-making power of an organization and the way that it's going to be structured is going to directly impact the way that the organization is going to behave on the market, right? So, for example, if you have a weak governance, or if you have if you have a leadership that is having some reputation risks, right? So maybe said something on social media that didn't sit right, or that just divided people within the company, right? That can have a direct impact on your numbers, on your profits as well. So that's why I like to think about all of these, the ESG. So I showed it earlier as a Venn diagram, well, because it's all interconnected. We are breaking it down just to show the different ways that it can show up and the different strategies. But at the end of the day, they all operate together. And this is very important to remember, that it's not operating in silos. And I'm going to say it a lot today. And I mean, it's nobody's fault. It's just the way that we were brought up, right? We have this stream, and this stream, but we forget that in between the streams, there may be some lines connecting some dots as well. So let's dive a little bit more into what each of these look like, and what kind of issues they can bring up, and also what kind of opportunities they can bring up as well. Okay, so I'm going to go through each of them, and I'm also going to put forward what are the impacts of each of those letters in a bit more detail, so that you can really have the thorough understanding before we jump into what can you do about it. So for the environment piece of the ESG, there are three components to really think about, the ones that have been proven to have the most impact across all industries. So climate change, no surprise there, natural resource scarcity, and or pollution and waste. Okay, so climate change has been proven to have an impact across everyone, no matter if you are a product provider, a service provider, it doesn't matter. Climate change will have an impact on your bottom line no matter what. Because guess what? With climate change, we're talking about increasing temperatures. We're talking about increased sea level. We're talking about more tsunamis. We're talking about more hurricanes, more storms. And all of these together will affect the supply chains all over the world, will affect the availability of your primary resources, or maybe you have to travel for work. but you can because there's a hurricane on the way, or you get stuck somewhere, so you're missing a very important board meeting as well. So climate change will have a direct impact on your organization. So that's something that is very real. And I know that in Canada, we are a bit sheltered from that just because, the impacts are not being felt as much, but we're almost in December. Let's look outside. There's no snow. The warming of the planet is something that is imminent, and that will mean also then a change in the animal behavior. And what that means, it's a change in the food availability as well, right? We just have to go to the grocery stores to realize that the impact is here, right? It's not tomorrow. It's not going to be, it was not yesterday. It is here now. So the sooner we can look at what it means for us, the faster then we can put things in place to mitigate the risks. That feeds directly into natural resource scarcity as well, right? Because with the increased, with the rise of the temperature and all of those climate change events, then natural resources are become more scarce, especially with the overconsumption that we see in our, from mostly the Western world. There's then an increase in prices, right, for just raw material. I don't know if anybody tried to build a house lately. I did not, but a colleague of mine did, and she was telling me how the price of wood tripled, even quadrupled in a way that was unmanageable. And it was last year. So I'm guessing that it's even more expensive now. Or if you're looking at steel, right? Everything that comes from natural resources, the prices will quadruple and even 10 times fold. So this is very real as well, especially if you are an organization that has products. Something, once again, to think about and to incorporate. And as we can see, this leads as well to war and to conflicts around the world. And some that are happening right now, some that have been happening for decades, and some that will happen as well when you're going to have the battle for the resources. Then you have pollution and waste. Pollution and waste is mostly a health concerns, a health hazards. Therefore, what that means is that there's going to be most likely policies and restrictions as to where we can operate and how we can operate. And how do you dispose of your waste? This is something that I know that I looked at an RFP not too long ago, so request for proposal, and it was on equity and inclusion, mind you, but they had a question around my waste management. What do I do with my waste? So this is something that can be very real for you. Now, in terms of the impact that they can have, so I touched on it a little bit, but I really want to really point out how some industries are going to be more exposed than others to climate change, and this is across the board, right? There's not one that is less than the other. They're all going to affect the organization in a different way, but climate change is probably the biggest one. So in terms of physical risks, well, if you have an organization that is on the coast, well, with the rising level of the sea, then you have a literal physical material risk to your infrastructures, to the roads, to the ports, to the people living around the coast, etc. So, and close to any body of water that is being fed directly by the sea, right? In terms of transition risks, so here we talk about the cost of what it would be to transition your business model and the way that you do things to adapt to the way society is evolving towards to. So for example, if you are a manufacturer of cars and you have been just thinking, well, there's still oil and gas, it's okay. I'll just, I'll be cute. I'll use diesel, right? I'll be a bit different. But then looking at the rise in policies demanding carbon neutrality, or at least offsetting, then you're kind of in a bad place, because then you're relying on oil and gas for your business, but then at the same time, there's a push towards renewable energies. So then that cost to transition your business should have been done much earlier, so that it could have been spread across time instead of being in the 6-7 figures immediately, right? So that's what we mean by transition risks. And then finally, there's the human risks. Yes, health hazards, but also human rights, right? So human labor wages, equal pay, labor rights. Right now, we're on the strike in the province of Quebec, right, for labor rights with the syndicates and all of that. So this is a human risk. So think about, and we have an example right there with Esther, right? With Esther, like her kid cannot go to school because there's a strike. So that affects her livelihood, because maybe she's not working from home, or even if she's working from home, her child is there. So except if they're teenagers, it's really hard to work with children in your home. So that disrupts her own ability to make a livelihood. And we can just think about all the different people that it may have impacted, or that have to take forced sick days because of that strike, right? And I mean, it's for a good cause. Don't think I'm against this strike at all. But this is just a reality that what does it mean for a business? That's the human risks, that environmental, that, you know, of those factors that we can have in terms of human risks. Now, in terms of social, there's different ways. Well, I talked about human rights and labor management earlier, but it's all interconnected. In terms of the social, there are different ways that it can show up, but what research from McKinsey and PRI, which is a body of certification that really looks at responsible investing, found is that for the social component, the social factor of ESG, the ones that have the most influence, the most impact, has been human capital management, product service safety, and human rights labor management. So for the human rights labor management, here I'm going to tie it again to the environment. So let's think about the conflict in Congo, right? Looking for the resources needed to make our cell phones, right? Then it's about, okay, well, what do we do with that information? Is there a change in the way that we approach the issue? But that's clearly a human rights violation. And there's a lot of human rights violations going on around the world to feed into the consumer society that we are into. So then it's up to the companies to be able to have an eye on their third parties, on their providers, to make sure that there is no scandal that is coming and being fed to the consumers, right? Same thing for product safety and service safety. It's around, okay, well, am I putting something out there that is safe to consume, but also am I contributing further to the social fabric of the society I am living into? In terms of human capital management is, well, how well do you treat employees, right? How well do you treat the human beings around you? And the fact is that more and more regulatory bodies around the world are calling for more disclosure of everything happening in an organization. So even if you're a solopreneur to some extent, depending on what you want to do, those regulatory disclosures are going to affect your business in a lot of different ways, right? So for example, the human capital management, look at the shortage of skilled labor, within most industries. I don't know one company or industry right now that says, hey, I'm good, I don't need to hire anyone. Haven't seen it so far. Looking once again at uneven wage growth, also the impact of tech, right? The impact of tech in the evolving market trends. That falls into the human capital management as well, right? And this is a significant material risk for an organization, because it also speaks into the agility of the business to be able to incorporate, AI, yes, but other technologies that are coming in, and how can we use it well, but in a human-centered way, right? And not just use it as an excuse to just streamline everything, but get rid of the humans, right? For product safety, as I mentioned, the corporation or the business reputation is absolutely tremendously important. And there's also a thing here around regulatory fines. There are a lot of companies that are being fined every day, every single day, for a misuse of their product or non-disclosure of what's been happening, right? Or even food recall. I don't know if you know, but food recalls cost, and that's in the States, I believe, food recall costs around $10 million per recall in terms of its impact on the whole industry and the supply chains. That's huge, right? So there is a real risk associated with safety. So I touched already on the human rights and labor management, but once again here, a clear example, and I mean that exemplify everything, is the whole scandal of Nike that used forced labor, right? And that generated boycott, lost deals, and it hurt the bottom lines big time. It took them a long time to recover from that, and they're still not totally recovered. They're under like a microscope on every single aspect. Now, in terms of the impact, well, from what I've been saying, it's not a surprise. The impact of the social factors will be on employees, so in terms of engagement, retention, because we know that that's a Gallup study showing that engaged employees will be 21% more productive within a team, which is quite significant when you look at your net revenue. But disengaged employees cost around $500 billion yearly due to burnout, absenteeism, and just being very passive, right? There's a lot of terms that have been coming out, but like the quiet resignation, something like that, where someone is there but they just don't do anything, or they do the very bare minimum to not get fired, but they don't put out anything out. So that's part of the impact of social factors on employees. For customers, well, it's all about the price, the reputation, the trust, the environmental sustainability, but also the customer experience, right? So if you do your ESG well, especially on the social factor, your consumers, your customers, your clients will be engaged and will feel that their needs are being heard, right? And that creates trust and loyalty within your client base. In terms of communities, well, once again, the environment comes directly into play there. So raw material, real estate assets as well, right? The labor, everything that touches the community, the in-kind contribution that an organization may make to show how they are embedded within the social fabric of an organization, right? So all of these are impacted. Last but not least, for the G, people are gonna be like, what? All of this just for those 3 letters? Yes, indeed. We could spend like 2 hours per letter. When we talk about governance here, we talk about a wide range of issues, really depending on how you categorize it, okay? So why I'm saying that is because here there's a word diversity, okay? But when you talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion, it can be seen as a governance issue, yes, but also as a social issue, and even to some extent as an environmental issue, right? So just keep that in mind, that just because one thing is under one quote unquote bucket, it doesn't mean that it has to stay there, okay? So these are examples. There are other factors contributing to governance, but these are the ones that have been found to be more impactful. So the 3 factors for governance, so the decision-making, if you wish, the leadership is board quality, diversity, and effectiveness. And we know that it's not always the case. Reporting, transparency, and business ethics, so everything pertaining to reporting standards. And finally, executive compensation. when we talk about a board quality, diversity, and effectiveness, we're talking about, yes, the qualification, but also the accountability measures that is being put there. What kind of management is being put in place? Is there a clear process as to the nomination? And how are we going to get to a board that is representative of the society that the business lives in, right? Because if you don't put efforts into, okay, well, how accountable is my board? How representative is my board? Then you will lose engagement once again, right? And you will lose trust from the business around you. In terms of reporting, transparency, business ethics, it's really about looking at, okay, well, how can I show that, yes, I have good governance, I'm human-centered, and I have a good social and environmental focus in my business, but how do I show this forward, right? And especially if you are in a stage of your business where you want to scale up and you want to maybe go towards venture capital, or you want to have investors coming to you, this is going to be very important, right? So how transparent is your organization? Do you have frameworks to report on this? How are your business ethics, right? So transparency here is really the new normal from customers, but also for the company. Long lost is the time where we hid everything. Because nowadays, if me personally, when I evaluate client, I'm always go on their website and their social media to see what kind of image are they portraying about themselves. Can I find their code of ethics on their website? Can I find their teams? Some organizations don't put their teams, and that's a personal choice. But knowing the market nowadays, especially with millennials and Gen Z, this is even more important that companies be as transparent as they can, so that the perception of them is closer to the reality of the image that they want to portray, if I'm making any sense. So there are different frameworks that you can use. So the ones that I personally prefer is the GRI. So that's the Global Reporting Initiative. It's very well common, and it's really it really shows different standards to report your environmental, social, and governance goals. Very easy to find, and it will be sent and given to you. Don't worry, it's very soon, later. But there's the GRI, there's the SASB, which is for Sustainable Standard Boards. There you go. Etc. So we're gonna explore that more on the how, so that you have a clear example as to what you can use. In terms of executive compensation here, well, it's to make sure that the compensation is not just tied to the profits, right? It's to make sure that it's also tied to some environmental and social benchmarks, so that the executives are held accountable, the leadership is held accountable, and there's a greater chance that there's a real integration of ESGs within the fabric of the business. In terms of the impact, well, nothing surprising there, but the impact of those governance factors really resides as well in the stakeholder trust and the license to operate. And what we mean by that, I call it almost like the social authorization for the business to exist and to operate, right? So if you have good governance within the organization, then you're going to have trust from your employees, from people that are interacting with the company, third-party providers, supply chain, etc., right? And really cultivating that trust is gold nowadays. People are fighting for clients because of the lower purchasing power, because of inflation and everything going on in the world, right? So this is very important. The enhanced risk management is that, well, if you hold people accountable, then you'll have a higher chance to be able to catch risks or catastrophe to happen before they happen, and even maybe turn it into an opportunity. One example of that would be, well, we talked about Nike, right, with the forced skilled labor. But if you look at a company like Unilever looked at the fact that, okay, well, I want to explore different markets. Everybody has been using forced labor. Let me tap into those markets and see what I can do so that I can just open maybe unmet needs. And that's exactly what they did. If you research Unilever, that is a B Corp as well, they created a whole market where they sell their products and they train their sales associate or the people on the ground and provide income from people from countries that may have more economical difficulties, for example. Okay. And finally, here for the long-term value creation, well, if you trust an organization, you're going to be a long-lasting customer, right? And by being able to uncover all of those different markets, then you're going to be able to create more revenue streams as well, which is never something that a business don't want, as long as it's done in the right way. So there's real value in really thinking about those three letters as to how they can really make your organization better. So this is why it's important, right? Like, so that you can have a good corporate or business reputation, that your risks are reduced, and hand in hand with more opportunity rising up, and being able to understand how you can manage these. It's almost like a coin, right? With like risk and opportunities on both sides. And when you're able to incorporate ESGs within your organization, within your business, and use them properly, then you're able to just see things way before they happen. Or if you're in the midst of it, at least you know that you're not alone and you don't need to reinvent the wheel all the time. There are practices around you, there are resources that you can use. And then you'll be able to just sniff out opportunities in a much faster way. And this then, the ES, especially with the S and the G, you're going to be able to cultivate a culture within the organization that is foolproof, or as much as you can be, because there you will make sure that it's an inclusive workplace. People are treated well. People want to work with you. It's not that they have to, it's that they want to work for you because you create value in their lives. And people are proud to work for organizations that create value and that have a positive impact on them, but also on the communities around them. And to be honest, ESG really gives a competitive advantage because of all of the reasons there. Again, risk and increased opportunities and growth, always there. That will always be there for ESGs, but it also helps you to anticipate and adapt to the new tech coming through, and to also all the regulatory changes that are coming our way, which is only going to get worse, or not worse, but let's say more like tighter or more specific. I'm anticipating things to change dramatically in the next 2 years, max. So getting on this is really important, especially if you have teams. You really want to make your employees feel like you care for them, that you empower them so that they can stay there, and that you can then have the best people working for you. Not the best people in general, but the best people for your business as well. Because then an increased trust within stakeholders will mean a better corporate or business reputation. So we have about 12, 15 minutes. Can we say that? Yes? Okay, cool. All right. So where do you start? I just dumped a lot of information on you, okay? So let me just distill it a little bit and just show you 3 steps that you can take to start looking at how your organization is and where you can start, okay? So The first one is to determine your ESG issues and opportunities. And for that, you have to go back to the concept of materiality. Materiality, so you heard me talk about material risk earlier. Well, materiality is pretty much the ESG issues most important to the long-term success to the business. So most often than not, it's going to be the things that will impact the business straight away, or not straight away, but in a very obvious manner, and it's going to stay there for the long run. So to be able to determine your ESG issues and then opportunities, then you can do a materiality analysis. And this is a process to determine which ESG issues are most important for the long-term success of your business, but also for the stakeholders, and also I would say for the planet and for the planet at large, I would say. I'm going to say though that it is still in development, so you may hear different people say different things around what framework they're using, because there's not a clear framework as you do this. I'm suggesting steps for you to start to visualize it, and then after you can go with what works best for your industry and for your company. So don't be scared of the graph. This is just an example of what it can look like, okay? So for growth, I mentioned, so materiality, but also make sure to be transparent and that you take into account regulations, okay? Very important. But this is what a materiality analysis can look like, okay? So this is where you look at the different aspects of your organization and you define clear stakeholder groups. So what I mean by that, okay, well, my employees, my supply chain, my board, the community I'm involved in, etc. So you really determine these groups first, and then you try to create a benchmark. To create a benchmark, you look at all the companies within your industry, within your sector, and see if they did something similar. And if not, hey, guess what? You create your own. And you are just taking the lead within your industry. Then what you're going to do is that you are going to consult those different stakeholders group by doing interviews, focus groups, etc. If you're not a big organization, it can be just a one-on-ones, or it can be during a meeting, asking your team, your staff, okay, so what do you think is impacting us the most in terms of environment, social, and governance factors? What are the most important thing that we have to think about according to low, medium, and high? Then you do an analysis of these consults to see what are the main things that comes up, and then you prioritize them on these axes. So the only thing that we say is that the x-axis, so the horizontal axis, has to be the importance to business, or the relevance, if you want. And then the y-axis, or vertical axis, is the importance to the stakeholders, okay? But now you may ask me, okay, but that's great, I can do that, but how do I put it together into a structure for me to be able to incorporate into the strategy? Well, this is when you choose a framework. So there are multiple ones. I'm gonna go through four for you, okay? So the first one is the SASB, so the Sustainability Accounting Standards Board, that focus really specifically on the financial aspect of things, the financial material risks of sustainability issues. So if you're more in eco-fiscality, for example, or in the sustainability sphere, this may be a really good one for you. The GRI, or Global Reporting Initiative, have some standards for companies to report on depending on their economic, environmental, and social impact. So in there, you have also governance that is just assumed if you want, but this is another one. Then you have another one that I don't use often, but that I've seen clients use, which is the TCFD, which is an industry-led initiative that provides a framework to help businesses just report on information about their risks and opportunities in face of climate change. And the last one I'll talk about is the one that I use personally for my business, is the B Corp Impact Assessment, or the BIA. So it is, to me, one of the most complete tools, along with GRI, that a company can use to really measure its impact on its workers, community, environment, customers, and also the governance and the way that you operate your business and how your business model is. Okay, so I did this exercise with my company last year, and this is just to show you what it looks like. Okay, and you can go on the website of B Corps, and you'll have all the B Corps in the world as well as their score. So in terms of transparency, it is there, right? So when you look at the BIA, it's always evolving, right? It's always evolving, responding to criticism, feedback, but it is pretty much based on you have to have a minimum score of 80, and then you have to improve it every single year. And it is separated into those 4 categories. Well, there's 5 technically. So governance, environment, community, and customers here. Very transparent, showing you all my results. And no, I don't mistreat my customers. It's just that I have to put in place some policies and procedures now that I'm expanding my team. But you can go and look at all of this on the website of B Corp. But this is why I like it, because it really forces you to dive deeper into those different buckets. And that doesn't mean that you have to be a certified B Corp to do it. You can just do it. It's free. You can just do it just to see where your gaps are, just so that you can have an idea that, oh, maybe on my environment side, I should do more efforts. Or, oh, on my community side, or my governance, or my customers, that's what I'm doing right now, right? About putting in place all of those specific needs for code of conduct, employee handbook, promotion ladder, and all of these things, right? So B Corp is a really good choice for that matter. And the step 3 is to put it all together and to create your ESG strategy, right? So you have your data, you have the different ways and the different framework that you can use where you should address more focus and not, and then you create your strategy. So first you have to start with purpose. And I know it sounds very cheesy, but hear me out. Purpose is what drives a company, is what drives the unmet needs within the organization, within the world, right? So the purpose is going to be almost like, okay, but what would the world lose if my organization disappeared, right? And by answering that, then you start with your purpose, and you start with also the strength, the best strengths that you are giving to the world with your business. Then you want to find a way to align purpose and ESG by using the ESG frameworks, for example, that can show you how you can run your business to deliver your purpose, looking at environment, social, and governance, right? Because purpose without ESG is not measurable nor strategic. It's just wishful thinking. If you want, it can work, but not in the long run. And ESG without purpose isn't focused enough, right? It's like a laundry list of things that you need to do. So it's not rooted into the business. And finally, so you identify your material risks. So once again, you can identify them with the frameworks or with your consults. And then you can start from there and try to see if there are best practices in your industry that can inform and just nourish your uncovering of the risks and also associated opportunities. And then you put it all down on a strategy, and you try to do it. I always tell my clients to not go more than 2 years at a time. If you're going to do a strategic plan, don't do it more than 2 years, because I can guarantee you after a year and a half, 2 years, things are going to change drastically again. So this is really this is one of my last slides. So just pointing out again that it's extremely important to really build purpose and ESG into the DNA from a company. If you're a startup, great. If you're not, it's okay. We can always find a way to put it in there, because it really developed a real competitive advantage. And I had to put this in there given what I do, but please resist the culture wars. right, around EDI, the LGBTQ or abortion rights, the global wars, the conflicts, right? But I'm not saying don't talk about it. I'm just saying look for opportunities to be human-centered and maybe drive some conversations without judgment, right? So you can ask skilled facilitators to help you, but this is an opportunity to make your workplace even more inclusive. Think about ESGs in systems, not in silos. And I would say that especially for Black entrepreneurs, ESG can really be essential in opening doors to investors, more customers, but also accelerator programs. And certification as well as B Corp certification, or if you identify as a woman, women-owned certification, etc. So do not think that it is just for others. I believe that there's a real incentive here for Black, Indigenous, people of color entrepreneurs there. And if you want to Google this person, this woman really took the ESG and really put it at the forefront of her business. So Salisa Berrien, she's the founder and CEO of Circle of Influence, so COI Energy. And she created a platform that detects and eliminates energy waste. And she guides the way that she does business with the ESG, right? From the E, so in terms of how can I maximize and make energy waste more efficient. On the S, okay, well, being a Black woman in a space that does not see a lot of Black entrepreneurs, how do I show up? How do I make sure that my organization is at the forefront of those conversations? How do I make sure that those are pillars within my organization? And in terms of governance, she talks about allyship. She talks about cultivating those networks around you to be able to have access to those programs, to these investors, so that it's not just about what's on the paper, but it's about the human that is in front of them. So if you want to Google her, check her out. I absolutely love her company. So in recap, I truly believe that ESG principles are not a nice to have, but a must have to really guide your decision making in a way that is going to make you relevant and also rooted into our society, so that you can move with society instead of being just in one place and being stubborn about it and not moving and then losing market share over that, right? Once again, there's not one clear framework. So that's why I gave you multiple ones. So I invite you to go and check them out and see which one really resonates with you so that you can really go and evaluate the ones that you want. So you can follow those 3 steps that I mentioned. So to determine your ESG related risk and opportunities, to choose the framework that's going to guide putting everything into a strategy, and finally, crafting your ESG strategy by going back to your purpose and aligning it with ESGs. Because yes, ESG framework can provide a competitive advantage, but more than that, it can make sure that you maybe even contributing to the solutions of a lot of our societal problems with your business model at the forefront. So thank you. Merci beaucoup, Miigwech. And if you have any questions, I am here to answer them en français ou en anglais, peu importe.
Merci beaucoup, Julie. Franchement, la présentation était riche en informations sur l'ESG, mais aussi en termes de pratiques appliquées sur nos entreprises. Je vais inviter les participants à poser des questions, que ce soit sur le chat ou de lever la main pour que je puisse vous céder la place pour parler. Mais on a une première question. C'est de Zongo Roselin. Et la question, c'est: l'intégration des critères ESG impacte-t-elle la gestion financière d'une entreprise? Comment procéder à une analyse financière avec l'intégration des critères ESG afin de montrer l'importance de ces critères pour le bon fonctionnement de l'entreprise? Donc voilà.
Very good question.
On va commencer.
Oui, bonne question. Donc, Je dirais qu'au niveau financier, donc il y a des frameworks comme le SASB, donc qui va vraiment aller regarder l'impact financier. Donc le Sustainability Accounting Standard Board, si je me rappelle bien, j'ai toujours la misère avec les acronymes, parce que ça va venir vraiment regarder, OK, ben c'est quoi, comment est-ce qu'on peut améliorer nos pratiques financières à l'intérieur de l'entreprise à différents niveaux. Donc, je donne un exemple. Est-ce qu'on fait affaire à des third-party providers, par exemple, à des contracteurs pour tout ce qui est comptabilité dans l'entreprise? OK. Si oui, est-ce que justement ce contracteur-là, est-ce qu'ils ont un code éthique? Est-ce qu'ils ont justement, est-ce qu'ils ont quelque chose qui dit que oui, euh, ils vont pas aller contre les droits, comme les droits de la personne, qu'ils n'ont pas un impact négatif sur l'environnement, etc. Donc, ça, c'est une partie. Puis après ça, au niveau de la gestion financière, dépendamment de l'entreprise, où est-ce qu'on a des investissements, par exemple? Est-ce qu'on a des investissements dans tout ce qui est pétrole, comme donc son gas and oil, minerais, etc. Donc, de voir, OK, ben à partir de là, est-ce qu'il y a une possibilité qu'on puisse peut-être plus miser sur des énergies renouvelables, par exemple? Donc, comme ça, c'est un exemple de comment ça peut être vraiment interconnecté. Mais le SASB serait une excellente première partie. Le BIA aussi, le B Corp, le B Impact Assessment, il y a toute une partie qui regarde justement tes profits et puis est-ce que vous faites des dons à des organismes à but non lucratif, à des charités? Est-ce qu'on paye ce qu'ils appellent, ben ça c'est plus aux États-Unis, ils appellent ça un living wage. C'est pas vraiment applicable au Québec en tant que tel parce que ça fait un petit peu partie de notre système. Mais est-ce qu'on paye bien les gens? Est-ce que c'est un peu plus que le minimum wage? Est-ce que les personnes peuvent subvenir justement avec est-ce qu'on leur paye? Donc ça, c'est un autre aspect de la gestion financière. Euh, et puis, bien entendu, comment est-ce qu'on dépense l'argent? Ça peut même aller jusqu'à la banque avec laquelle on fait affaire. Est-ce que la banque avec laquelle on fait affaire, est-ce qu'elle a des investissements elle-même dans les armes, par exemple, avec les militaires, avec l'armée, encore une fois, oil and gas, etc. Donc, il y a vraiment plusieurs façons d'aller voir les, les répercussions de nos pratiques financières. Donc, c'est pour ça que le SASB, puis même le GRI jusqu'à un certain point et le BIA pourraient vraiment être intéressants afin de déceler, de décortiquer un petit peu qu'est-ce qui se passe au niveau de la gestion financière.
Est-ce que ça répond à la question, Zango? Je ne sais pas s'il est encore là, mais it was, moi, je suis ébahi par toute l'information qui a été divulguée.
Oui, oui, c'est bon, c'est bon, c'est
C'est
bon.
bon?
Merci
Super,
beaucoup.
merci Zango. Euh, Puis j'avais fait partie d'un sommet qu'on parlait des principes ESG. Puis je trouvais ça un peu difficile à comprendre pour une jeune entreprise, ou plus particulièrement les entreprises afrodescendantes qui sont confrontées à des difficultés quand même, qu'on le sait déjà, là, au niveau financier, trouver de l'argent, ainsi de suite, toutes sortes de problèmes. Qu'en plus que les principes ESG soient des choses qu'on implémente dans la grosse machine, qui éventuellement va arriver à ces petites moyennes entreprises à un moment donné. Ils n'auront pas le choix s'ils ont besoin de financement, s'ils ont besoin de se développer, que ces critères-là vont faire partie des demandes de subventions, des demandes de bourse, peu importe. Puis ça va avoir un impact direct sur ces petites et moyennes entreprises black-owned. So, j'essaie, bon, ma question c'est plus que comment on peut, moi je sonne l'alarme là, dans le fond, à savoir que ces principes-là, ils ont un impact direct sur nos entreprises, qu'il faut les prendre en sérieux. Je pense que dans ton dernier site, tu disais qu'il faut les implémenter, it's a must-have. Moi, j'ai l'impression que ça doit être mandatoire que on comprenne ces principes-là pour pouvoir modifier nos modèles d'affaires, pour éventuellement profiter de ça, malgré que c'est difficile. mais j'aimerais avoir ton avis par rapport à ça et cette situation-là pour les entreprises afrodescendantes.
Je vais
Oui,
juste mentionner juste avant que Windor a levé la main. Donc, après d'avoir répondu à cette question, c'est de passer directement avec Windor.
Windor, parfait. Oui, donc, écoute, excellente question, bien entendu. Et oui, quand je dis un must-have, c'est en essayant d'aller vers le mandatoire. Mais la réalité est que autant qu'il y a eu un mouvement anti-woke, entre guillemets, il y a aussi un mouvement anti-ESG. Surtout aux États-Unis, qui vient plus donc de la droite républicaine que de la gauche. Toute personne qui ne croient pas au changement climatique, etc. Donc, vont naturellement pas aller vers des concepts ESG, même s'il y a le côté social et gouvernance. Je ne crois pas que ce sont les genres de principes qu'on peut imposer aux gens. Il faut démontrer à la longue un petit peu pourquoi est-ce que c'est important. Et c'est pour ça que quand je parlais justement de l'impact des social factors justement pour la main-d'œuvre, etc., c'est que on va dire les jeunes millennials et puis Gen Z, et puis les nouvelles générations qui vont arriver, c'est même pas une question, ça fait partie de leurs valeurs. Donc, je suis pas trop inquiète pour ces générations-là. Par contre, ce que je suis plus inquiète, c'est sur l'influence que certaines personnes vont avoir dans leur parcours professionnel. Donc, je pense que c'est vraiment plus une question de s'assurer que les gens comprennent c'est quoi d'abord et ensuite puissent l'adapter à leur propre réalité. C'est pour ça que moi, pourquoi j'aime les ESG puis surtout le B Corp Impact Assessment, oui, je suis B Corp Certified, mais j'aime le fait que c'est pas rigide dans le sens que selon ton entreprise, tu vas avoir différents critères. Comme pour pouvoir te guider. C'est par exemple pour le BIA, dépendamment de où est-ce que tu cliques, il y a des questions que tu ne vas pas avoir à répondre parce que ça ne va pas être relevant pour toi. Comme moi, par exemple, mon coût de mon supply chain, c'est pas applicable pour moi. J'ai pas de produit en tant que tel, moi, c'est juste des services. Donc, pour inciter les gens à aller plus vers les concepts ESG, c'est juste de vraiment offrir, hey, voilà qu'est-ce que c'est, voilà comment ça peut impacter votre business, comment ça peut vous aider à aller de l'avant justement avec qu'est-ce qui va faire en sorte que votre business va survivre, par exemple, va survivre la prochaine crise économique, la prochaine récession. Comment est-ce que votre business va survivre à l'interne la prochaine guerre? Comment est-ce qu'elle va vivre le prochain événement climatique si on est en bord de mer, par exemple? Donc, je mentionnais que moi, ma mère, elle venait du Sénégal. Donc, moi, j'allais quand même assez souvent à Dakar. Si j'ai une compagnie, ça va être quelque chose qui va être dans ma tête parce que Dakar, c'est une ville, c'est une ville au bord de la mer. Donc, encore une fois, toutes ces petites choses auxquelles il faut penser, mais on ne peut pas forcer les gens. On peut juste, c'est ça, juste vraiment les inciter en leur démontrant les avantages. Et puis, pourquoi? C'est aussi la bonne chose à faire. Mais honnêtement, j'ai vraiment confiance qu'on s'en va dans cette direction-là, ne serait-ce qu'à cause de cet éveil collectif un petit peu du fait que les choses ne sont pas en silo, que les choses sont vraiment interconnectées dans un système. Et on le voit vraiment beaucoup en ce moment dans les 2 derniers mois, là, dans la dernière année, même depuis la pandémie. Et les choses ont commencé à changer. Donc, c'est aussi pour ça que les business devraient penser à comment est-ce qu'on peut changer pour être aligné justement avec ce parcours, cet éveil collectif qu'on est en train dont on fait tous l'expérience en ce moment.
Merci. Windor?
Oui,
Ouais, oui, bonjour. J'ai vraiment apprécié. C'est vraiment de l'information vraiment importante là. Et une des questions que j'avais, c'est que, tu sais, au niveau des bâtiments, je donne un exemple. Au niveau des bâtiments, on a LEED, on a des certifications LEED et tout ça. Je pense, j'ai manqué le début de ta présentation, mais est-ce que ça va être le même principe aussi avec ESG? Il va y avoir du ESG 1, 2, 3 avec des niveaux qui peut-être peuvent être atteints par les entreprises pour les aider en quelque sorte à développer comme leur réputation ESG, par exemple. Parce que j'ai entendu dire que avec cette nouvelle norme-là qui s'en vient, tout ça, une banque là pourrait te refuser un prêt
Mhm.
parce qu'au niveau du ESG, tu ne respectes pas les principes au niveau ESG. Donc, je me suis dit, est-ce qu'il va peut-être avoir une certification que les entreprises vont pouvoir aller chercher? Est-ce qu'il va y avoir des grades dans cette certification-là? Comme on le voit au niveau des bâtiments, on
Mhm.
voit qu'il y a LEED, on voit qu'il y a BOMI ou quelque chose du genre. Il y a différentes certifications comme ça. Est-ce que ça va être le même principe un peu pour les entreprises, les organisations?
Ben, d'abord, merci, puis excellente question. Euh, je ne pense pas qu'il va y avoir nécessairement une certification ESG. Pour qu'il y ait une certification ESG, il faudrait qu'ils se mettent d'accord sur un framework. Et pour l'instant, il y en a beaucoup qui répondent aux critères ESG selon l'industrie, selon le lobby de tel domaine, de tel secteur, etc. aussi. Donc, je pense que surtout au niveau du UN Global Compact et puis au niveau du GRI, ils essayent vraiment d'amener donc tout ce qui est investisseurs et puis consommateurs ensemble, parce qu'il y a différentes initiatives, que ce soit au niveau des investisseurs, des compagnies, des consommateurs, etc. Après ça, ils essayent de voir comment est-ce qu'on peut mettre tout ça ensemble pour avoir justement une certification à long terme. Honnêtement, je ne pense pas que ça va être fait tout de suite, parce que on commence à gratter un petit peu justement l'importance. Et, euh, et c'est pour ça qu'il faut, en tant que compagnie, c'est important de garder ça en tête que, OK, ESG, OK, est-ce que j'ai quelque chose pour chacune de ces lettres-là, par exemple? Est-ce que j'ai une politique environnementale? Est-ce que ma politique, mon code d'éthique pour les employés, est-ce qu'elle est à jour? Est-ce que les gens la respectent? Est-ce que j'ai une politique anti-harcèlement, par exemple, une politique antiraciste? Est-ce que Donc, il y a beaucoup de choses qu'on peut faire pour répondre aux exigences ESG, parce que je peux te garantir que les banques, elles n'en ont pas, elles n'ont pas un truc, elles n'ont pas une certification en tant que telle. À part si la seule banque que je connais qui a une certification, c'est la BDC. Elle a une certification, comme c'est une B Corp. Donc, tu sais que cette banque-là répond à certains critères et vous pouvez aller le voir sur le site Internet B Corp. Mais c'est pour ça que pour l'instant, en attendant qu'il y ait justement cette certification-là avec certains grades, parce que je pense que j'aimerais ça moi aussi savoir si il y a une business qui est comme ESG3 versus ESG1.
Ou
Il y a encore
ESG,
ouais,
Gold, Silver, Bronze.
ouais, tu sais, bronze, gold, etc. Euh, mais pour l'instant, ce que je dirais, ce serait de. Excuse-moi. Il y avait un petit bruit autour de moi. Je suis comme, ah, ça vient d'où? Euh, donc, ce serait de vraiment regarder, OK, mais c'est quel framework parmi, par exemple, les 4 que j'ai donnés, lequel serait plus adapté à moi? Et puis voir, OK, allons-y pour un. Comme je mentionnais, le GRI, je pense pas qu'il faut payer. Le BIA, donc le B Corp Impact Assessment, c'est gratuit, for sure. C'est un peu cher. Maintenant, c'est pas un peu cher, c'est un peu long, excusez-moi. Juste parce qu'il y a plusieurs parties, mais justement, ça te fait aussi poser des bonnes questions pour voir si ta compagnie répond à plusieurs critères à travers, justement, différentes portions. Puis d'ailleurs, le BIA est en train d'évoluer pour avoir encore plus de piliers, dont un pour tout ce qui est supply chain et puis les droits de la personne. Donc, tu as vraiment beaucoup de choix, mais c'est vraiment pourquoi on a tant de choix, c'est parce qu'il n'y a pas un consensus qui est clair. En gros, c'est ça que ça veut dire.
Excellent, merci beaucoup.
De rien.
Oui. Y a-t-il d'autres questions? Donc, je vois que dans le chat, il n'y a pas nécessairement de questions. Berthaud J-Henri nous dit merci pour cette belle présentation. Non, il n'y a pas d'autres questions, je crois. Alors, je vais laisser Williamson conclure. Mais ça ne vous empêche pas, si vous avez des questions après coup, n'hésitez pas à envoyer un courriel à up@origine.org. Et donc, on pourra littéralement vous connecter avec Julie qui se fera un plaisir de vous répondre. Donc, Williamson, je te laisse la parole.
Cool. Moi, j'ai plein de questions dans ma tête, mais je pense que pour mon organisation, c'est des choses qu'on doit peut-être discuter avec toi, mais ça, c'est une autre chose. Mais en termes d'organisme aussi, on travaille avec plusieurs entrepreneurs. So, pour nous, ça devient important de pouvoir avoir un webinaire comme ça et montrer aux gens que c'est important, c'est un must-have. Il faut garder un œil là-dessus, puis éventuellement entamer des actions. Puis j'aimerais peut-être dire aux gens, comme la transformation numérique, it's a journey. J'imagine aussi pour le ESG, it's a journey. C'est pas quelque chose qui s'implémente tout de suite rapidement, puis après ça, vous laissez faire. Non, c'est évolutif, ça se transforme, puis il faut le faire bit by bit. Sur ce, un gros merci, Julie. I think I've learned so much today. I'm overwhelmed with the information, but at the same time, I'm very happy to have received that, webinar. For me, it's very important as an organization like Origin Village and the ecosystem that we have and what we're trying to build for the future, that most of our businesses understand that these are things that are very impactful and they need to take that in consideration in their journey. So thank you so much. We're very happy for everybody that had the opportunity to come today. Merci encore d'être venu. On va vous partager les informations d'ici le 15 décembre. Toutes les sessions d'automne vont être disponibles sur notre channel YouTube. Vous pouvez toujours y accéder. On va mettre le lien où on vous envoie des infolettes. Abonnez-vous à nos infolettes. Répondez à vos courriels. Ça va nous aider à propager l'information le plus que possible, mais cette présentation-là va être partagée pour pouvoir avoir un impact auprès de tout notre écosystème d'origine. On a un petit survey qui va automatiquement qui va être généré après la fermeture de ce webinaire-là. So, on vous invite à remplir le survey. Si vous allez voir, c'est pour vérifier, pour voir qu'est-ce qu'on fait chez Origine, nos learnUP. Est-ce que vous apprenez? Est-ce que c'est bon? Est-ce que c'est positif pour vous? Est-ce que c'est un impact auprès de votre entreprise ou de votre parcours? Donc, c'est pour ça qu'on demande aux gens de remplir le survey. Par la suite, le prochain learnUP, c'est le 8 décembre à midi. Ça va être sur le critical thinking au niveau des médias, que je pense que c'est un sujet exceptionnellement important par rapport à ce qu'on vit présentement. Donc, on vous invite à vous inscrire immédiatement. Vous pouvez vous abonner à notre Eventbrite. C'est là que tous nos événements sont listés jusqu'à nouvel ordre parce que Eventbrite, on a des petits problèmes avec eux autres jusqu'à date. Mais bon, tout ça pour vous dire qu'on vous remercie de votre présence aujourd'hui. On vous envoie les infos d'ici le 15 décembre. Puis suivez nos différentes initiatives avec Origine. Suivez Julie sur les médias sociaux. Elle a son entreprise. Donc, si vous avez besoin de services au niveau de vos principes ESG, puis s'assurer que vous pouvez les implémenter dans un parcours avec elle, on vous invite à la communiquer avec elle. Elle est sur LinkedIn, elle est sur Instagram. Suivez-nous sur les médias sociaux, puis restez à l'affût de tout ce qui s'en vient. Un gros merci à tout le monde, puis on vous souhaite une bonne journée.
Merci beaucoup. Prenez le temps de digérer toute l'information.
Effectivement.
Merci beaucoup à vous.